So recently, I polled the Splatoon community, and with over 3,000 people, we have a list of the top 10 best and worst maps in the game voted on by you guys. Keep in mind, I never specified this as a competitive list, and it features all of the maps in Splatoon history. With that all being said, subscribe if you enjoy it, and let's get started. This poll was done via selecting multiple options that would gradually get smaller, with the first poll having around 2,000 votes, then around 1,000, and then a little over 3,000 for the final poll. The very top and bottom of the list was the same, and I figured this would be a bit more accurate and disincentivize people from voting for a map that they think has a chance of winning the poll rather than one they don't like, which ended up being more accurate in my opinion. A few interesting data points before we get to the top 10. There were no Splatoon 3 original maps in the top 10 list at all. In fact, only 2 Splatoon 3 stages received more than 200 votes out of just over 2,000. The 2 maps that did get a bit of votes though were Barnacle and Dime and Hagglefish Market, with Hagglefish getting the highest placement at 12th place, though I personally think Barnacle is better. 11th place was another top 10 contender, Snapper Canal from Splatoon 2, but it came so close to making it in. As for the bottom half, there are 2 stages notably missing for not just the bottom 10, but even the bottom 15, which is Moray Towers and Salt Spray Ring. It just goes to show that even though these were some of the worst maps competitively, they still had a lot of attributes to make them fun and unique to keep them out of the bottom of people's least favorite maps. Finally, for the first poll, I separated variations of many stages that had sizable differences between different ports, and this had some interesting numbers. For example, more people preferred the Splatoon 2 version of Manta Maria than Splatoon 3, whereas on Humpback Pump Track, which got more favorable changes, it was preferred more for its Splatoon 3 variation than Splatoon 2. There were other examples where it was a bit more drastic than I thought, like for Flounder Heights, Splatoon 1 drastically beat out Splatoon 3's numbers. Once we get to the top 10, the variations are combined, except for Hammerhead and Maki Maki, and, well, you'll see why later, as we'll be talking about all of them. Anyway, enough stalling, let's get to the top and bottom 10. At the very last spot of the best maps, in 10th place, is Hammerhead Bridge from Splatoon 1. Honestly, I'm surprised this one was so low. I really enjoyed this map. It does definitely have a bit of a hallway layout if you don't look at the inside of the map at all and just have a silhouette of it. But man, when you open it up, it was really interesting. The Great Bridge was an incredibly cool gimmick that didn't over-centralize the stage in any way, well, maybe outside of Rainmaker or some Splatlings, but was really interesting and unique, and I think would have been really cool to see with something like Brushes being able to roll over grates in the next game. The sides were big with a variety of entrance routes, and it was pretty easy for all weapons to get in with. I think it's still very underrated. For our 10th worst map, we have Port Mackerel. This one isn't too surprising. There's a giant lack of inkable walls, and all of the approach routes are on pretty flat ground. It's pretty susceptible to spawn locks and lockouts, and just generally sucks on most modes in the game. Number 9 on the best maps next is Urchin Underpass. I mean, this is a classic and possibly the most popular Splatoon stage ever, given it's in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which you know how that's sold. This was also the first stage to ever be reworked, and it got a pretty good one. The stage doesn't have any super defining features, but it has a variety of routes and approach options, and was many people's first introduction to the game. As someone who's revisited Splatoon 1 fairly recently, I honestly really enjoy this map. Number 9 on the worst maps is another Splatoon 1 stage, Kelp Dome. Like with Port, this map is also pretty flat. However, it does at least have a few grades on the top of the map that make it a little bit interesting. The layout definitely still suffers from a giant lack of linkable walls, which seem to be a pattern in the bottom 10 in general. Most stages here have a distinct lack of walls to be able to climb on using squid form. Going to number 8 in the best maps in the game is Piranha Pit. This is one of the few stages that were distinct in 2 different variations while being good in both Splatoon 1 and Splatoon 2. The first game has it a smaller, much more close quarters combat type of stage, with the 2 central conveyors allowing you to jump between them, as well as being able to jump off of them to go for shots onto snipe if you played some mid-range weapons like Range Blast. The conveyors were a really cool gimmick, and the sides featured a lot of open terrain, and it was very easy to retake on this stage in particular. In Splatoon 2, it became a bit of a wider map, but everything else played out pretty much the same. I've enjoyed both of them. At the number 8 worst stage, we're starting to enter Splatoon 3 maps, was Scorch Gorge. I mean, it's not hard to see why. On zones and turf war in particular, there's an extremely limited amount of ways you can move, and a lot of the map is just kind of barren. The sides at the very bottom are kind of interesting, but that's the highest compliment I can give this map, really. At number 7th in the best maps is the map that I did not expect to get this far, but Manta Maria. Personally, I didn't even expect this to break the top 10, but it's getting pretty close to the top half. There was a clear preference for Splatoon 2, and with the block being present to allow additional routes in most of the modes, it makes sense. For how lackluster Splatoon 2 stages were with their gimmicks compared to Splatoon 1, this one is one of the closer ones, as the grates and pillars that keep the ship together end up making for some unique fighting terrain. For the 7th worst map, we have a stage just 1 point higher than Scorched Gorge, Eeltail Alley. Yeah, I mean, it's a flat hallway with the bridge that's extremely easy to camp, making it just a pain to get through mid, and then one of the worst stages to get locked out in the game. And it's one of the few stages to get a negative change, as when the polls update were added, they ended up taking out a retreat route. Yikes. And just narrowly away from the top 5 is Anko V Games. Anko, I'm gonna get made fun of for saying it either way. Like with Piranha Pit, this was another variant that I think had unique attributes in Splatoon 1 or 2. I particularly like Splatoon 1's fan jump on the top right side of the map, and just the ability for that fan to take you in much more locations than in Splatoon 2. However, Splatoon 2 drastically improved the areas outside of mid, and added some more interesting locations with the fan on the flank. And at the 6th worst stage, we have Brine Water Springs. Remember how I said lack of inkable walls was a theme here? Yeah, I mean, this is the stage with some of the lowest in the entire series. The bottom flank routes are extremely limited and committal, the stage is tiny, it's incredibly safe and predictable for long-range weapons, while the positioning is boring for those playing them. And just in general, it feels like a pain to move on a stage this small. Not too surprising that it's down here. Entering the top 5, we have Splatoon 1 Mahi Mahi Resort. I'm surprised this one was this low. One of the fan favorite maps, and before its drastic shrinking, had a variety of islands, unique approach options, places for both long and short range weapons to stand, and was home to the most interesting gimmick in the series. The water level dropping based off the objective or timer in Turf War allowed for really interesting gameplay as the stage morphed, and Splatoon 1 Mahi Mahi in particular did a great job of having the terrain of the stage when the water is up and down both feel unique and special. Jumping to the bottom 5, however, we have arguably the worst gimmick in the series, with Wahoo World. Yeah, remember how we just talked about Mahi's ability to give you more stage to play on? Well, this is the opposite, with the main entrance route to the bridge retracting for half the match. Whenever the bridge is down, the stage can feel unbearable, and without it, it's not great either. Some uninkables around mid make it difficult to approach, and the rotating carousel, which is much more interesting, just isn't even moving on some of the modes. Definitely one of the stages with the most wasted potential. On to the best stages again, we have Mako Mart from Splatoon 2. I mean, this is one of the most popular maps, the stacks are pretty cool, and the entire stage just generally feels fun to fight on. I think the routes on the sides could be a little bit more fleshed out, but there's just so much interesting and unique terrain on this map, as well as a really cool setting in a supermarket. On to the bottom 4, we have what used to be called the FD of Splatoon, Walleye Warehouse. It was kind of the first linear hallway of the series, with incredibly limited and easy to camp side routes, as well as possibly the worst spawn region in the entire series, home to many complaints over the years. Switching from that though to the top 3, we have Museum de Alfonsino coming in 3rd place. The spinners on this stage are amazing as a unique gimmick, and with Splatoon 1 being the one with the most votes, it's definitely even more apparent there with the spawn spinners. Splatoon 1 also features the stage being more open with an extra route on the side, and it flows amazing. On to the 3rd worst stage is Mahi Mahi again, just the version in Splatoon 3. This one kinda got me surprised. While the stage is really small, I think it retains a decent bit of quality in its zones and turf war layouts that I still honestly enjoy. That being said, yeah, Tower Rain and Clams have some absolutely abysmal layouts, with one of the smallest and most limited routes in the entire game, as well as a terrible spawn region. And don't even get me started on the tower control layout with this trench thing, or Clam Blitz preventing you from having any jump across the islands until the water level drops. This stage did lose a lot of its charm from Splatoon 1, and maybe that negative rework is part of why it's here, even if it's decently common in zones in competitive play. At the 2nd best stage is Flounder Heights. In Splatoon 1, this was one of the most fun and unique maps in the game. you have such a width of routes to be able to climb up to the enemy side, it's crazy. When comparing it to Splatoon 3, it's no surprise that the Splatoon 1 version had almost 4 times the votes in the original poll. The roof high grounds in general created very unique fighting terrain, and with a much more improved spawn region and way more inkable walls in the first game, it's no surprise to see it here. It's definitely one of the most unique stages, and as we've gone further into Splatoon 3, I miss more and more of what they took away from the map going into this game. Splatoon 3's layout still isn't all bad though, and I do think the map being a bit smaller in mid while still retaining it being high ground was a good change, as well as the extended spawn region, but it definitely doesn't compare to Splatoon 1. Speaking of not comparing to Splatoon 1, the second worst map in the game is Hammerhead Bridge. Yeah, they really turned this thing into, at least in my opinion, slightly better walleye, and yeah, it's really unfortunate. Everything from the spawn region to losing its unique gimmick to the middle of the map basically just got worse between games. It's hard to find anything that the Splatoon 3 variant has over the original stage, and that just sucks. Before we get to the best map, let's go to the worst. With almost 500 more votes for it than the stage in second place, this dominated the worst maps poll. It's Mincemeat Metalworks. Honestly, I was kind of surprised by this. I don't like Mincemeat by any means, but personally, I think plenty of other stages are worse, but this one seems to be the one you guys dislike the most. I can't say I'm too surprised. The spawn area is kind of fine, but everything out of it is incredibly difficult to move on, linear, and has a lack of creative freedom for those playing it. It is one of the stages that gives you the smallest amount of options when playing it and feels the most samey, so I can see it getting boring faster than some of the other stages. I really like the setting too, so this is a bit of an unfortunate fate. Like with the worst maps, the best map also had a sizable gap of over 400 votes. It's the Reef from Splatoon 2. I mean, this stage was already pretty solid, but after it got its rework, wow, I mean, this has been seemingly the standard for good maps. Back when I critiqued Splatoon 2 stages, this was one of the main examples of one that got it right. It's got a cool setting, the best spawn region in the game, plenty of routes, works well on almost every mode, doesn't really alienate any type of weapon you want to play, and the bridge in the middle of the map creates a lot of unique variety, especially with the sides of it being inkable, allowing for some interesting approaches, and in general, there is so many different ways you can play this map. It's no surprise to me then that Reef is the absolute best of the best. Well, that was an interesting poll, and a little depressing on the Splatoon 3 side. But hey, I hope you guys enjoy. I'll see you all next time.